Okay, hope everyone is well. Hope you had a good Sabbath yesterday. I heard that some of you guys also had your own informal fellowships. So I think that's really good. We're going to be continuing with our class of Job. Last week we already had 6 classes on the book of Job, and we got to Job chapter 21. Okay, but before we go back to the content of the book of Job, I would like to answer some questions first. I received 5 questions on in this for this class. So let's address those first. Okay. Okay. There were 2 questions related to family altar, right? Okay, so the first question was, Pastor Sam shared about the importance of having a firm family altar in Christ. What should you do if one of your family members is not cooperating, right? Other than forcing the person. Second related question is, how should we encourage someone who is struggling with rebuilding their family altar? Okay. Yeah, we talked about family altar, I think, one of the first classes, because we saw how Job, he would send and call for his children and then to make burnt offerings and sanctify them. Okay. And truly, a Christian's life, worship is a lifestyle. Okay? It's not just a few hours in the week that we set aside to worship. So, like an altar to God, a worship should always this altar should always be burning. This altar should always be built. Okay. So I remember in one of those first classes, I was asking how many of you do pray regularly with your family or have like a regular family altar time, and thank God about half of you did. This question seems to be asking, maybe there's one member or a couple members in your family that seems like don't really want to participate. And I think it really depends on your role. Okay, your role in this situation. If you are if this person who doesn't want to participate is like your sibling, I think more of the responsibility is upon your parents, your believing parents, to kind of think of how to encourage them to join the family in worship. But as a sibling, I think you can, do your best too, and live a life that really glorifies God in your family, right? So that your other family members, your siblings, can see how wonderful it is to worship God, how worshiping God, it changes you for the better. Okay, it's very easy to get into fights and squabbles with siblings, call each other names and all that. But I think when God is in the center of the home and God is really ruling your life, your relationship with your siblings and parents too often improves a lot. Okay? There's a lot more trust, a lot more forgiveness, a lot more love. So I think the best thing to do there is live a life that glorifies God, and do your best to set a good example for your sibling. Okay? If this family member is like a parent who may be a period of weakness and is not cooperating, I think the answer is very similar too, although it's definitely more difficult. Okay. Do our best to live as a child of God that honors our parents, even though they may be in a period of weakness. Let's continue to pray for them. Okay? Yeah, you really can't force a person, especially when they're older. Okay. Because that type of you can't force love, right? By definition, you can't force love. You can't force someone to love God. Yeah. So I think we just have to do our best through prayer and our lifestyle. Okay, winning them without words sometimes. The only time that you really would do more forcing, I think, is if one day you do become parents. For young children, I think it is right to enforce certain habits and traditions in the family or just their daily life, even before they may fully understand. Okay? We do that all the time with young kids. Like we force them to wash their face, bathe, brush their teeth, even before they really comprehend, right, what's going on. And I think same thing with uh, family altar and prayer and singing hymns, attending church, even though they may not fully understand, but we just bring them along, right? Bring them along, and hopefully, like those habits can then be entrenched, and the heart will come later, right? The heart will come later. Okay, so this question really depends on your role. Okay, it really depends on your role, and I think this also answers the second question. Okay, yeah, it's definitely tough. It's definitely tough. It's like when somebody doesn't have an appetite, how do you force them to eat? It's really tough sometimes. Okay, so do our best through prayer and living a godly life. Next question is, during Job's time or the Old Testament in general, did they know about Satan or have a concept of evil spirits? Um, well, if you take the book of Job just as an example, right, and if we assume the author is kind of a contemporary of Job, right, whoever it was, that already can allow you to understand their concept, right, of evil spirits. Okay. So I think we can look into the book of Job itself. Okay. So the author himself, inspired by God, knew about Satan coming into the presence of God and how God sent him, right, or allowed him to strike Job. Yeah. So yeah, assuming this is pre-Mosaic times and the author was a contemporary of Job, then those concepts would have already been there, right, at that time. Okay. But in the other books of the Bible, the Old Testament, we eventually do see other spirits, right, in the text, like in the book of Judges, the book of First Samuel, where God sends spirit, distressing spirit, or some translations even say evil spirit, right, to to, like, for example, for King Saul, right, God sent a distressing spirit to bother him because of his jealousy for David. Right? The two cases where the word Satan occurs outside of Job, the actual word Satan occurs outside of Job in the Old Testament, is in First Chronicles 21. I think it's 21, where he rose up and tempted David to make the census, and then also when he accused Joshua, the high priest, in one of Zechariah's visions. Okay, so those are two cases, and those two cases are much later in the history of the Israelites, right? That's like post-exilic. Right? But Job itself, I think, can be part of the conversation. Okay? So, yeah, I don't know if this is a satisfactory answer, but yeah, this is the best as this is the only answer I can come up with myself is also from the Bible. Okay, yeah, and those are the biblical examples that we see. Okay, how do I comfort my friends who are going through unstable relationship with partners in and out of church? Is it wrong to discourage them from continuing the relationship? Okay, yeah, so probably towards the end of maybe your university life, in the middle of your university life, you're already preparing for marriage. So maybe you'll start to get into relationships. I think Preacher Timothy must have covered plenty about this, right? So yeah, we should only begin relationship when we feel we're ready to enter into a marriage, right? Because dating itself is to see if we're suitable for marriage. Okay? Yeah. Otherwise, we're just putting ourselves in unnecessary temptation. Okay? Unnecessary temptation. Now, when we do begin in a relationship, the Bible is very clear in the principle we should marry in the faith. Okay? As a marry in the faith. So if you have a friend in the church and they have a relationship with somebody who is outside of the church, actually, I think as a friend, as a spiritual friend, we should try to use wisdom and try to let them know that this is not the principle of the Bible, right? This is not the principle of the Bible. Yeah. So I think when you're trying to like guide them in that situation, trying to comfort them when they have like what a fight or a breakup or something, I think it's right to discourage this type of relationship. Okay, I think it's right to discourage this type of relationship. Okay, but if this person is seeing somebody inside the church, right, seeing if they're compatible for marriage or whatnot, sometimes, yeah, sometimes things may not be so compatible, right? So I think the best thing to do is to pray with them, help them to think things through, and if there are some red flags or incompatibilities, then yeah, maybe they just have to break it off, right? And maybe God has something else planned for each brother or each sister. Okay, yeah. So relationships definitely can be sometimes quite dramatic. Yeah, it is sometimes can be stressful. Yeah, I think be a listening ear is a good place to start, and then use the Bible to encourage our brothers and sisters. Okay, okay, hopefully this helps answer those questions. Um, Besides these Q&A questions that were submitted, were there any other questions from Job chapter 1 to 21 that maybe surfaced during these past few days that we didn't have class? Feel free to type that into the chat, okay? Oh, okay, there's one more. Okay, one more. Can we say Job is self-righteous? Okay, can we say Job is self-righteous? My answer is yes and no. Okay, yes and no. I'm going to start with no. Why I say no? No, I don't think he's self-righteous in the kind of classic way we think of the word. I think the typical way we think of the word self-righteous is like that guy, like the Pharisee in Luke chapter 18, right? Let's turn to Luke 18, and in verse 11, you can see the Pharisee praying to God, saying, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I possess. Right. So this is, I think, the more typical sense that we have of self-righteousness, where the person is starting to despise others, right, and exalt themselves. I don't fully see this in Job because I don't see him putting down others, right? But he is self-righteous in the sense that um, he wants to make his case before God and be vindicated before God, right? Um, so like self-righteous in the kind of literal sense of the word, right? That he's seeking to justify himself before God. Right? Yeah. So in the end, we do see that there were like some of these small blind spots and mistakes that he did have, and that's why he did repent. Okay, so yeah, so that's why that's my answer to that question. Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's go now to Job chapter 21. I think we started this already. This is the third cycle of Job speaking with his friends. Right, third cycle. This is where Job speaks up and says, "After I speak, you can keep on mocking me." Right. So tensions actually are still kind of flaring. And his main logic in this chapter is that we observe quite often that the wicked, right, the wicked prosper many times and may not necessarily be destroyed right away, right? And therefore, the friends cannot use that against him, right? The friends keep on insisting that Job must be wicked, that he is suffering, right? So the friends cannot use the fact that he's suffering right now to show that he's wicked, okay? Because that's the common experience that we can observe in life. Okay, I think we covered this last time. So let's now go to Job chapter 22. Job chapter 22. Here we see Eliphaz speak for the third and last time. This is, his fiercest attack on Job, right? Fiercest attack on Job. I think we mentioned before how Eliphaz, his tone, his pride kept on growing and growing. And it's, manifested fully here in his speech, I think, right? Because he starts to make many accusations in the beginning of this response. And the way that he's speaking to Job, he's starting to take all of his initial assumptions now as truth. Okay? Like Job definitely did all these things. Okay. Let's read Job chapter 22. Let's read verse 5. Okay, read verse 5. 5 through 7. Let me ask Shenny Lin.
Verse 5. Is not your wickedness great and your iniquity without end? 6. For you have taken pledges from your brother for no reason, and stripped the naked of their clothing. 7. You have not given the weary water to drink, and you have withheld bread from the hungry.
Right. So these are direct accusations that of like different sins that Job supposedly committed. Right? Is not your wickedness great? You have taken pledges from your brother for no reason, okay, and stripped the naked of their clothing. You have not given the weary water to drink, and you have withheld bread from the hungry. So these seem to be, it seems like they're false accusations, okay? And they're just assumptions that Eliphaz is making. Okay? So his heart is like almost fully hardened now against Job, and he's just even coming up with things to attack Job now about. And in the next section, further misrepresents Job. What do I mean by that? Especially verses 13 and 14. Job 22, verses 13 and 14. I'd like to ask, let's go with Monica Huang. Monica, are you there?
What verse?
Verse 13 and 14.
13. And you say, what does God know? Can he judge through the deep darkness? 14. Thick clouds cover him so that he cannot see, and he walks over the circle of heaven.
Okay, so he's putting words into Job's mouth, at least from my understanding. Okay, because I couldn't find anywhere where Job said this before in the previous chapters. If you can, please let me know. Yeah, I don't think it's found anywhere. And he's accusing Job of basically saying God doesn't know everything, right? Like he's covered by thick clouds. He can't see. He doesn't know what's going on down here, right? But this is a misrepresentation. Okay, so then he further says, then why do you continue in your wickedness? Right? Okay. So as we get to the last part of his speech, he insists that Job needs to repent. Because if he were choose to do so, he would receive a lot of blessings. He would eventually prosper. Okay. Let's read verse 23, chapter 22, verse 23. Brother Chris Wu.
Verse 23, if you return to the Almighty, you will be built up. You will remove iniquity far from your tents.
Okay, yeah. So I found a similarity between this passage and also what Zophar said in chapter 11 in the first round, towards the end of the first round. Right? You can compare this when you have time. Okay, it's very similar. Yeah. Okay. Any questions or thoughts, comments on Eliphaz's speech here? Okay, let's go to Job's response. In chapter 23 and 24, Job responds again by expressing his desire to see God in court. Right? See God in court. If he's basically thinking that if he were to have this time before God, he would definitely be vindicated that all this suffering is not because of his wickedness. He didn't do anything wicked. Right? So in verse 3, he says, Oh, that I knew where I might find him, that I might come to his seat. Verse 4, I would present my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. And then I would know the words which he would answer me and understand what he would say to me. Yeah, he wants to reason with God and then eventually be delivered. So that's not we talked about that before already. That's not a new idea. But he also knows it's difficult to access God, right? God is hidden, very much hidden and beyond us humans at times. Okay. So verse 8 and 9 says he goes forward, God is not there. He goes backward, he cannot perceive God. He goes to the left and to the right, and he cannot see God. Okay. So God is spirit. God is not easily detected by our physical senses. Okay. But he still insists, even though God is difficult to access, but Job kind of trusts that God knows that he is innocent. Okay. He trusts that God knows he's innocent. And actually, verses 10 through 12 is I think, very good attitude to learn from when we're going through suffering. Okay, let's read verses 10 through 12. Verses 10 through 12. Let's ask Jordan. Jordan, Kiale no Homoku.
Okay. Chapter 23, verses 10 and 12. But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold. 11. My foot has held fast to his steps. I have kept his way and not turned aside.
12.
12. I have not departed from the commandments of his lips. I have treasured the words of his mouth, most than my necessary food.
Okay, right. When we are going through tough times, these are good verses to really put to heart. Okay. We were talking about, I remember last week, when we suffer, we do need to try to understand the reason why, right? Understand the reason why. And I was saying, there's generally two categories. The first category is God is chastising us. He's correcting us in some way. And the second one is maybe there's not necessarily anything specifically that God is trying to correct, but he's trying to refine us in some way. There's still some kind of weakness or imperfection he's trying to fine tune. Okay. And verse 10, I think, is like that, right? So for Job, he sees his suffering as God's test. And after he goes through this test, he will come forth as gold, right? Refined in the fire and like pure gold. Okay. Let's turn to a verse. Let's turn to 1 Peter. Okay. It's not exactly using gold, but this verse is kind of similar. Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 1. First Peter chapter 1. And let's see. Chapter 1 and 8, verse 18. Okay. Actually, this is not the verse. Yeah, it's not the verse I was looking for. Actually not the verse I was looking for. 1:7. Let me see. Okay. First Peter chapter 1. Oh, okay. Yes. Okay, yes. Actually, oh, so it is gold. Okay, I think I got two verses mixed up. Yes, let's read First Peter chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. Thank you for the people who texted to me the correct verses. Let's ask Sister Jane. Please read.
Verse 6. In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. 7. These have come so faith or greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may be proved genuine and may result in praise, glory, and honor where Jesus Christ is revealed.
Okay, so I think we can link this verse with the verse in Job, right? Job 23:10. Right? Truly, sometimes God's purpose for certain types of suffering is to bring us and refine us and test us by fire so that we can be even more precious than gold. Okay, or even precious than gold. Our faith is genuinely revealed. Okay, if your faith is never tested, you actually don't know how good your faith is, right? It's kind of like if you never are tested or have take exams in a class, you actually don't know the full extent of your understanding of that subject, right? So let's say you're taking some course, I don't know, biology 101, and you're like, oh yeah, I know biology. I memorized this or that. I got, yeah, I know. You brag to your friends, yeah, oh, that's such an easy class. But then it's really only in the test that you can show your mastery, right, of the subject. So kind of similar things with our faith. God is a tester of our faith. Okay? Genesis chapter 22 tells us that God was a tester of Abraham. Okay? So sometimes these sufferings and trials are allowed by God, and it's to refine us, to bring us more precious than gold. Okay? And while we are going through the suffering, let's go back to Job 23, verse 11 and 12. Job 23, verses 11 and 12. Before Jordan already read it, right? We need to, even though we're going through a hard time, we still have to hold on to God and be faithful, right? Don't sin in your suffering. Don't turn your feet aside from the way. Don't go away from his words, from the commandment from his lips, and continue to treasure his words in our mouth, even more than your necessary food. Okay? So truly, in those trials, very often it is the word of God that will sustain us, that will bring us through. Okay, that will bring us through. Yeah, the earth, the worldly comforts and like ways to try to mitigate our pain and suffering may help a bit, but in the end, in the inner core of your being, we really need the word of God, right? We really need the word of God. I've heard a testimony before, right, where there was this sister in another country, and at that time she was studying in medical school, and she was living in a city that was far away from church. Okay? And she was saying that for the first few months of medical school, she didn't pray or read the Bible at all. She didn't pray or read the Bible at all. And then one day, suddenly she felt really ill and sick, like she was about to die or something. So she mustered up her strength and was trying to walk to the nearest clinic. But as she was walking, to the clinic. I think this is how that testimony goes. I think she heard a voice from God. God was telling her, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word which proceeds from the mouth of God. So when she had this realization, she thought, okay, actually, this is not a physical thing. I need to go back home and pray. And when she went back home, knelt down and prayed and repented and turned herself back to God, then she was completely better, right? Completely better. Okay? So the Word of God definitely is something we always will need. Okay, it is should be our greatest treasure, even more than necessary food. Right. Okay, let's go back to Job's response. As we continue this chapter, he fearfully confirms that God is sovereign in all things. Okay. Who can change him? Who can change him? Okay. So verse 13, I think, encapsulates this idea. Verse 13, chapter 23, verse 13. Let's go to Sister Aveline. Job 23, verse 13. Sister Aveline, can you hear me?
She can't read right now.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see. Let's go to Annabelle.
Job chapter 23, verse 13.
Yes.
Okay. But he is unique, and who can make him change? And whatever his soul desires, that he does.
Okay, right. So this truth, this fact of God, of life, brings him fear too, and terror, right? Whatever God does, it can't be changed. And I think it's related to, like, he feels like maybe he's stuck in this suffering for a long time. Okay, let's go into chapter 24. Chapter 24. In this opening section, I think he then starts to complain at people who are truly evil and how injustice often continues. Right? Verse 2, some remove landmarks. Right? Landmarks here is referring to like stones that divide people's property. Okay? Not tourist landmarks. And some of them seize flocks violently. They also take advantage of the poor and needy, like the widows. Okay, so he goes into a long complaint on how there's so much injustice, violence, oppression in life. All right. And then the last few verses, I think is kind of interesting. Okay. In the NKJV version of the Bible, can you see it starts with quotations from verse 18? So it could be Job quoting the words of his friends. It's not Job's actual viewpoint. Okay. because the content of verse 18 to verse 25 is actually quite similar to the thinking of the friends. And it's kind of weird if Job has that viewpoint, right? Let's read verse 18. They should be swift on the face of the waters. Their portion should be cursed in the earth, so that no one would turn into the way of their vineyards. As drought and heat consumed, the womb should forget him. The worm should feed sweetly on him. He should be remembered no more, and wickedness should be broken like a tree. For he preys on the barren who do not bear, and does no good for the widow. Like, notice how these were some of the accusations that Eliphaz was putting on Job in the previous chapter in chapter 22, right? Verse 22 also says, but God draws the mighty away with his power. He rises up, but no man is sure of life. He gives them security, and they rely on it. Yet his eyes are on their ways. They are exalted for a little while, then they are gone. They are brought low. Okay. Now, if it is not so, who will prove me a liar and make my speech worth nothing? So there's, I guess, two possibilities, right? It's either what Job desires to happen to the wicked, or it could be a quotation from the friend's viewpoint, or like a paraphrase of the friend's viewpoint. Okay, sorry, I just saw some chats. I think I lost what I was talking about to answer the question that was submitted 3-4 minutes ago. So I don't know how to answer that one. Okay. Yeah. Okay, but any questions or thoughts on chapter 23 and chapter 24? Okay, let's go to the next chapter. It's very short, so I think we can conclude with this chapter. Job chapter 25 is now Bildad is going to speak for the third and final time. And it's only 6 verses. Okay, only 6 verses. It's as if he kind of ran out of things to say. And his basic point is, how can a mere man be righteous before God? Okay, this is like in verse 4. Verse 4. How can man be righteous if even the moon, right, does not shine, or the stars are not pure in his sight? How much less man, who is a maggot, and a son of man, who is a worm? And this is very similar to Eliphaz's arguments in chapter 4 and chapter 15. You can kind of do a comparison if you want. Right? If God finds like flaws, if it finds flaws in like angels and the stars and things like that, how much more a man? Okay, so, and the implication is, Job, you are a sinner. Okay? You are not righteous. Okay? You are not righteous. And I think one thing we're noticing is Job. Okay, there should be apostrophe there. Job's responses are getting longer and longer, and the friends are getting shorter and shorter. Zophar doesn't even speak in this cycle. Okay. Okay, let's conclude this session with a silent prayer. Okay, this is basically going to Yeah, and Bildad's response, right? Okay. Any questions from the previous chapters? Okay, if not, let's go on. Job's response here is the longest, okay? And it's the last response that he has before God speaks. Okay, so this is a 6-chapter long, like monologue even. After this, then we will hear from Elihu, and then God's going to speak. Okay, so this is Job's last kind of his final pleas and expressions, okay? And then God will eventually show up. Let's turn to Job 26. Maybe to begin, he initially addresses Bildad, and I think there's some like sarcasm here too. How have you helped him who is without power? How have you saved the arm who has no strength? Okay. So it's kind of flipping some of the accusations to Bildad, or maybe just the other friends in general. Then he starts to talk about God's wisdom. And I think this description is spot on, right? It lets us know Job's very, very good understanding of who God is. Right? Who is God like, right? What is his wisdom and power like? Here Job is a lot of times using nature, okay? Nature to express God's power and wisdom. The dead and Sheol is naked before him, right? So God can also see the ones who are dead, right? He stretches out the north over empty space. He hangs the earth on nothing. Right? He binds up the water in its thick clouds. Right? This is starting to talk about a little bit about the water cycle. Right? The water cycle. Maybe I'm getting this chapter confused with another, but there was also a passage that talked kind of in detail about kind of the rain and the lightning too. Is it this one? Or maybe it was a previous one. Okay, yeah, that's okay. So, but anyway, Job is using his using nature itself to again describe God's awesome majesty. And as we start the next chapter, he fully digs in. This is the hill he's going to die on, right? As long as he lives, he will uphold his integrity and never say that his friends are right, that it's because he sinned, that's why he's suffering these calamities. Okay, so let's read chapter 27, verse 3. Chapter 27, verse 3. Sister Julia.
Job chapter 26 verse
27, yeah.
27 verse 4. Sorry, which verses?
Verse 3.
Oh, verse 3. As long as my breath is in me and the breath of God in my nostril.
Verse 4.
Verse 4. My lips will not speak wickedness, nor my tongue utter deceit.
Verse 5.
Verse 5. Far be it from me that I should say you are right. Till I die, I will not put away my iniquity from me.
Integrity. Okay. Integrity.
Oh,
Okay.
integrity. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So Job's position is the line has been drawn, right? He's not going to budge. And then he comes just short of cursing them too. He doesn't say this like at them, but he says like, may my enemy be like the wicked, and he who rises up against me like the unrighteous. Okay. So like, yeah, it's not like a direct like curse, but it's pretty close. Pretty close. Okay, let's go next. And then he goes on to describe what happens to the wicked. Okay, what happens to the wicked. We know previously he was saying how the wicked are not immediately punished, right? This was in chapter 21. Do you still remember that? But Job is saying like the eventual end of the wicked is like this. Okay, so Job was saying sometimes the wicked still prosper. But he's also correct. In the end, the wicked will have to face judgment. Okay, so this is the verse. Let's go back to chapter 27, verse 13. This is the portion of a wicked man with God, and the heritage of oppressors received from the Almighty. If his children are multiplied, so he prospers, he has a lot of children, it is for the sword. Right? Eventually, God's justice prevails. Yeah. Though he, let's go to verse 16. Though he heaps up silver like dust and piles up clothing like clay, he may pile it up, but the just will wear it. So eventually, he's saying eventually the wicked will have to face the consequences of their actions. Okay. Verse 28 now. In chapter 28. Let's go to chapter 28 now. This is, again, Job talking about wisdom. Wisdom. And he uses the imagery of mining here, mining precious metals. Okay, so let's read verse 20, chapter 28, verses 1 through 3. Chapter 28, verses 1 through 3. Rachel Chang.
Chapter 28, verse 1. Surely there is a mine for silver, and a place where gold is refined. 2. Iron is taken from the earth, and copper is melted from ore. 3. Man puts an end to darkness and searches every recess, for ore in the darkness and the shadow of death.
Okay, this is people and how all the efforts they make to try to extract these precious metals from the earth, from the ore, right? And they smelt it and then do all this stuff and they refine it, okay? And as we continue to read, he's kind of establishing how men go to great lengths to find these metals. Okay? But what about wisdom? Wisdom is even tougher to find, right? Even tougher to find. Let's go to verse 12. Verse 12. 12 through 15. 12 through 15. Joanne?
Verse 12. But where can wisdom be found? Where does understanding dwell? 30. No mortal comprehend its wealth. It cannot be found in the land of the living. 40. The deep says, it is not in me. The sea says, it is not with me. 15. It cannot be bought with the fresh gold, nor can its price be weighed out in silver.
Okay, right. So this is how tough it is to find wisdom in the physical world. You can't find it. You can't buy it either. Okay. You can't buy it with gold. You cannot buy it with silver. When you keep on reading, you can't use crystals. You can't use coral or quartz. You can't use rubies. You cannot use topaz. Okay. All these precious metal stones are used to describe the great value of true wisdom. Okay. So in verse 20, Job asks now, well, where can you find wisdom? Verse 21, it is hidden, right? And concealed. And then if you keep on reading, true wisdom is found in God. Okay, verse 23, Job 28, verse 23. Let's go to Daniel Liu. Daniel Liu.
Verse 23. God understands its way and he knows its place.
Okay, please jump to and read verse 27 and 28. Yeah, Daniel, can you read 27 and 28?
Can you hear me?
Now I can. Yeah, now I can.
Okay. Verse 27 and 28. Then he saw wisdom and declared it. He prepared it indeed. He searched it out. 28. And to man he said, behold, that the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding.
Okay. All right. So this is Job's long discourse on wisdom. Okay. It's actually for me, I feel it's like a great. This chapter itself is also like a great, like literary masterpiece. He first establishes how men go about great lengths to try to extract metals, and then talks about how wisdom cannot even be bought by those metals that you go to so great lengths to try to buy. So where can you find it? True wisdom is found only in God. And not only just in God, but we have to learn to fear the Lord. Okay? Behold, to fear the Lord, that is wisdom. Okay? So what does it mean to fear the Lord? Can we ask a few people to respond? Anybody like to respond? What does it mean to fear the Lord? Because I think I mentioned this on the first day. This is one of those key ideas we see in the so-called books of wisdom. Right? So what does it mean to fear the Lord? Can anybody, can freely speak up, unmute and speak up? Or you can chat, you can type it for me and I'll read it out. Okay, somebody is saying it's to fear the Lord is to walk in his way and not our own way. Okay, I think it's a good start. Anyone else? This was also part of your homework too, right? This is one of the 4 characteristics of Job, right? Job was blameless, upright, feared the Lord and shun evil. Right? So what did you put down for fear the Lord? Another student is saying complete respect and submission to God. Another student is saying because of our fear and respect for God, we will keep his law over our own opinions. Okay? Any other thoughts? To show your reverence. Yeah, fear and reverence, yes, is linked together. Okay? Reverence to God. Okay, we have another one. Do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with the Lord. Okay, I'm quoting Micah. Okay. Let's turn to a couple of verses. Okay, another student says to appreciate God for being the one true God. Another student saying, because of fearing God, we dare not to sin against him. Okay, let's turn to a couple of verses. Let's first turn to Genesis chapter 22. Genesis chapter 22. And let's read verse. Okay, verse 12. Genesis chapter 22, verse 12. Erlinda, please read. Genesis 22, verse 12.
Verse 12, and he said, do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me.
Okay, yeah. So this is the angel of the Lord stopping Abraham from lowering the knife to kill Isaac, his son. Okay. So when the angel spoke, he said, now I know that you fear God. Okay. Now I know that you fear God. So how did Abraham show that he feared God? Okay. Or how does Abraham define fearing God for us? Well, it says here, since you have not withheld your son, your only son from me. Okay. So if you have true reverence to God, anything that God wants from you or needs from you, you will not withhold. Do you understand? So if he wants your obedience, many of you guys are talking about that, right? Then we will give him our obedience. If he wants our son, he wants our most precious things in life, our hobbies, our time, our energy, our comfort sometimes, right? If he wants that from us, we're willing to sacrifice it and give it to him too. We don't withhold, we don't hold anything back. Okay. So sometimes that might be kind of abstract, right? It can also, I think, a little bit more concretely seen in the church. When the church has a need of you, we also do our best, right? And withhold nothing that the church may need, because the church is the house of God. The church is the body of Christ. And if God has a need, the church has a need, right? And he's asking us, calling us to help, right? And provide, then we will go and do it, right? That's true. That's one definition of truly fearing the Lord. Okay. Yeah, because he is in the proper position in our relationship with him. Okay? He is our creator. He is our master. He owns us, right? And therefore we will not withhold anything. Okay. Yeah. So this is one essential verse to keep in mind. Right. Okay. So fearing the Lord, you can say, it's about honoring God Himself, honoring the house of God, right, the church, and also honoring the people of God, right? Honoring the people of God. When you fear the Lord, you will show respect to God Himself. Of course, that's at the highest. You will also show reverence and respect to His house, the church, and also you will honor and respect and properly treat His people, okay? Or just humans in nature too, who are created in the image of God. Okay. Any other thoughts on fearing the Lord? That is how we begin to have wisdom. Okay? That's how we begin to have wisdom. Now, this is eventually going to tie into our class on is it Thursday? Yeah, our last set of classes on Thursday. Okay. So I'll talk about that day. Okay, especially when we cover when God speaks, and then Job's humble response to how God speaks. Okay. Yeah, there's another kind of aspect to fearing God related to that. Okay, this is chapter 28. Let's keep going. In chapter 29, he begins to start to reminisce of his former glory. Right, former glory. Right, he's like, oh, I wish that I was still in the months past, right, when I still had the light of God upon me, when I was in the days of my prime, when my children were still with me. My steps were bathed with cream, and the rock poured out rivers of oil for me, right, when he was still very rich and living a very comfortable life. Right? So then he gets a little bit more specific too, starts to think about his former status. Former status. He actually was a very charitable man. So the accusations that Eliphaz was making in chapter 22 doesn't seem to hold water, right? Okay, because I think apart from Job making these claims, God also said that Job was upright, blameless, feared God, and shunned evil. Okay, so I think Job's recollection here of his past should be true. Okay, so verse 7 and 8, when he was in the open square, young people would stand and show him respect. Verse 12, chapter 29, verse 12 says, I delivered the poor who cried out, the fatherless, and the one who had no helper. Right. Verse 15, I was eyes to the blind, I was feet to the lame, I was a father to the poor, and I searched out the case that I did not know, meaning helping those who were oppressed, I think. Right? This is actually very, very wonderful actions and character and behavior for us to imitate. Okay, this is what it means to, be a person that God is so delighted in, that He would initiate and tell Satan, "Hey, have you considered my servant Job?" Right. This is the type of character and love and integrity that we ought to aspire to. especially for us brothers here, okay? Sometimes when you're in society, we get a lot of mixed messages of what it means to be a man. Okay? What it means to be a man, yeah. And the secular world has their definition. Okay? A lot of it has to do with actually sexual immorality, right? Yeah, that's what it means to be a man. But Job 29 actually is very good things for us as men to aspire to. Okay. You know how Proverbs chapter 31 is a chapter about the virtuous woman? You guys know that? The sisters, can you give me a reaction if you're aware of that chapter? Proverbs 31, the Proverbs 31 woman, right? I think it's from verse 10 onwards. That's like the ideal virtuous woman. Okay. Sometimes it's said Job 29 is the corollary for a man. Okay. Yeah. So definitely this section from verse 7 to 17 is good for us to review, okay, as brothers. His former self was very strong, glorious, like a king. He was popular and honored by the people. But then in chapter 30, it's kind of, chapter 29 is kind of setting up how greatly he has fallen. Okay. This was his former self, his former glory, his former status. Chapter 30 is now, oh, look at me now, right? Even the younger mock me. Okay, chapter 30, verse 1. Chapter 30, verse 1. But now they mock at me, men younger than I, whose fathers I disdain to put with the dogs of my flock. In other words, these younger men, their fathers actually were like wicked people. Okay, so Job disdained them. I think that's the way I'm reading this. Okay, so these are like families that are not that good. And the younger kids, the younger men of these families who probably have a lot of their own wicked deeds now are mocking Job. Okay. From verse 9 tells us some other ways he's been despised. They even spit on him and hassle him. Okay. They even like purposely annoy him and get in his way. Right. So this is his dramatic experience. Okay, going from the glory to this being this kind of like the scum of the earth. Right? I see a question here from a student. Would you say Job is being prideful? Is that bad in this context? I don't know. I don't see pride here. That's my personal opinion. I don't think it's prideful. I think he's just longing for what it used to be like. What it used to be like. He's expressing his desire for the past glory. Okay. I think from time to time we all will go through that too, right? We reminisce of the past, like when you're a kid, when things were carefree and yeah, you got to eat candy every day, right? But when you look past too much, actually, it can also paralyze you. Okay, the Bible tells us that we should strive forward to what is ahead. Right. This is in Philippians 3, verse 13. Philippians 3, right? Verse 13. We forget those things which are behind, and we reach forward to those things which are ahead and press towards the goal. Okay? So looking towards the past, I mean, it's not wrong, okay? Because sometimes you can look at the past for wisdom and experience and things like that. But if you get into a state of like complacency and just glorying in your past days, you're not moving forward. Okay, and that means your faith is stagnant. Your faith is at a standstill. Okay. So yeah, I don't. My personal thought is I don't think this is necessarily bad from Job. Okay. Let's go back to Job 30. Okay. So he's fallen greatly, and now he is in great mental anguish, and just wondering, how did all of this happen? Right? How did all of this happen? Yeah, look at verse 29 and 30, right? This is the suffering that he was going to. Job 30, verses 29 and 30. I am a brother of jackals and a companion of ostriches. My skin grows black and falls from me. My bones burn with fever. Right? So it's a lot of mental and physical anguish. Yeah, he's in despair here. Actually, this section is about despair, because he's also wondering why God would do this to him. Right? Verse 24, or verse 20. I cry out to you, but you do not answer me. I stand up and you regard me, but you have become cruel to me. Okay. Verse 24. Surely he would not stretch out his hand against a heap of ruins. It is referring to himself. If they cry out when he destroys it. So he's really having a really difficult time processing. Okay? And I think all of us would be in a very similar anguish too. Okay, let's go to chapter 31. Chapter 31. So even though he's just so bewildered and almost to the point of despair about what's going on him, what's happening to him, he's still insisting on his integrity. Okay, so in some of the verses here, it's related to his marriage. Chapter 31, verse 1, actually is a good verse, especially for brothers, right? For us to memorize. I have made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a young woman? Right? So the look upon is not just like looking, but it's like, it has, I think, implication of lusting here, right? So Job, in his uprightness, in his blamelessness, he had made a determination, a covenant with his own eyes. He's not going to look at a young woman in this way. Okay, so this is to keep himself upright in his marriage. Verses 9 through 12 is also same thing. If my heart has been enticed by a woman, or if I have lurked at my neighbor's door, then let my wife grind for another, and let others bow down over her. Okay, so he's saying like he's never been unfaithful. Even his heart has never been enticed to desire another woman. He's never lurked at a neighbor's door. He's never been stalking another man's wife to flirt and to try to win that person's affection. And he would even say, like, if I have done that, then let my own wife be someone else's lover. Okay, so he's really, despite his bewilderment, still insisting on how he has been good all of this time. He's also upholding that he has never been deceitful with others. This is verses 5 through 8. Right? This also could be in the context of marriage too, but he's never been deceitful. Okay. He also upholds his treatment of his servants. Okay, so he knows that these servants are to also be treated with dignity. Okay, with dignity. Verse 15 says, did not he who made me in the womb make them? Right? This is the foundational principle of human dignity. We're all created in the image of God. We're all created by God. Okay. All right, verse 16 to 23, he upholds his treatment of the poor, the fatherless, and the widowed. He also upholds his treatment of money, wealth, and rejecting idolatry. And the idolatry portion, I think, is found in verse 26 and 27. Okay, if I have observed the sun when it shines or the moon moving in brightness, I think the subtext is about sun worship or moon worship, I think. Okay, and he also upholds his righteous behavior in not taking revenge, right? Okay, or you guys know the word Schadenfreude, German word. Verse 29, if I have rejoiced at the destruction of him who hated me, or lifted myself up when evil found him, right? So Job did not have Schadenfreude, right? Am I pronouncing that correct? Yeah. Can somebody type that word? Look it up and type that word in the chat. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we, as Christians, we shouldn't have that, right? Schadenfreude. Okay. Yeah. Anybody here take German? If anyone take German, can you pronounce that for us? Okay, I don't know. Okay. But yeah, anyway, that is pleasure in other people's calamity, right? And it's common nowadays, very common nowadays. We should, as Christians, we shouldn't have that. Okay? Also, he opposes behavior in being charitable. He also talks about how he has not been hypocritical. He also says that he has never hidden his sins before God and repents of them. And then also, finally, regarding land, the way he has managed his land. Okay. Or steal from other people's land. Okay. So that is how Job concludes the bulk of his response to his calamity. Okay. So any questions from Job 1 to 31? Job 1 to 31. All right, let's go into the next section now. Okay, next section is Elihu. Okay, so we don't see Zophar speak, okay, in that third cycle. And now there is Elihu, right? Elihu, who suddenly appears. We never knew he was there. We never knew he was there, but he was there, okay? He was there. In chapter 32, verse 1, the three friends ceased answering Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. Okay? He was righteous in his own eyes. So this is related to that question before. Was Job self-righteous? Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes and no. From the friend's point of view, they also thought, yes. Okay. Job was righteous in his own eyes. So they thought, okay, Job, he's dug in, he's drawn the line, nothing's going to convince him, so they stopped speaking. Then Elihu begins to speak. Let's read from verses 2 through 6. 2 through 6. Let's ask. Let's go to Brother Eno. Job 32, 2 through 6.
Verse 2. Then the wrath of Elihu, the son of Bereshel the Buzite, of the family of Ram, was aroused against Job. His wrath was aroused because he justified himself rather than God. Verse 3. Also against his three friends his wrath was aroused, because they had found no answer, and yet had condemned Job. Verse 4. Now because they were years older than he, Elihu had waited to speak to Job. Verse 5. When Elihu saw that there was no answer in the mouth of these three men, his wrath was aroused. Verse 6. So Elihu the son of Bereshel the Buzite answered and said, I am young in years, and you are very old. Therefore I was afraid, and dared not declare my opinion to you.
Okay, thank you. This is how we are introduced to Elihu. Okay. We see many times the word aroused, right? Yeah, his wrath was aroused. His wrath was aroused. So actually, Elihu is introduced to us as somebody who is very passionate. Okay, he's been observing what's been going on, and he also has his own opinions, and he actually wanted to speak. Okay, and why is he angry? He's angry because of two reasons. First, it's because Job keeps on justifying himself rather than God, right? He keeps on wanting to have this court case before God to justify himself, and he doesn't just accept, and justify God for what God has done or allowed to happen to him. Okay? So one anger is directed at Job. The other anger is directed at the three friends. He's angry that they've been talking to Job this whole time, but they still could not identify a true cause for Job's calamity and suffering. And yet they were insisting on condemning Job. Okay? They weren't able to really come to a true and confirmed source of all this suffering. Okay? So Elihu was angry at that. Okay? And even though he was angry, he still allowed these three friends to just have their say first, because they were older. Okay, they were much older. But then, as he was sitting there and listening to them, he realized that everyone who has the breath of God in them, they also have a measure of wisdom. Okay. And then also, since they stopped speaking, he felt compelled now to use this opportunity to finally speak up and also like find relief from his anger, right? And his emotions in speaking up. Okay. All right. So yeah, we'll pick it up from there in our next class on Thursday. Okay. Okay. Hopefully this has continued to help us understand the book of Job. Right. Let's continue to read it if you haven't finished, and gain the teachings and wisdom that this book imparts to us. Let's bow our heads and pray in silence. Amen. Okay, I think I should pass the time to the coordinators.
Okay, so in the name of Jesus Christ, we have some announcements. So for announcements tonight, if you haven't finished your essay question for the test,